If you're looking for a simple sweater that's comfortable to wear, this is a great place to start. This one comes together with minimal shaping, making it easy and actually enjoyable to crochet. If you're comfortable working with homespun yarn and you know how to half double crochet and slip stitch, you can definitely make this sweater. The step-by-step tutorial is coming up. There are 5 components to this sweater: 2 body pieces, 2 arm pieces, and the collar. Both the body and arm pieces start with a band of slip stitches and move into a half double crochet section. The collar is worked in just the band stitch pattern. The arm bands and the body bands start out exactly the same. You'll chain 7, then flip it over to find the back bump of each chain. Make a slip stitch in the second chain from the hook and in each remaining chain. You'll have a total of 6 stitches throughout all 4 bands, both arm pieces, both body pieces. As you're working your slip stitches, pay close attention to the V's that are made by each stitch. This is how we'll identify where to work the next row of stitches. So go ahead and chain 1, which doesn't count as a stitch by the way, and turn your work. Now locate that first V and make a slip stitch through the back loop only. And that's your repeat. Make 1 slip stitch in the back loop of each stitch, for a total of 6 slip stitches in every row. Remember to chain 1 and turn at the end of every row. So this is how you'll start the band for both body pieces and both arm pieces. So you can use this section of the tutorial to guide you through those particular pieces. The only difference between the two is, of course, how long you make it. Now the length itself is different for every size, so go ahead and refer to the pattern to get the length for the size you're working on. Now you can find the pattern for free on my website, or if you'd like to download or print the pattern, you can become a B.Hooked Insider, so you have access to the PDF, plus a private messaging system if you need pattern support. I'll have all the details for that in the description below if it's something you want to check out. So we talked about the similarities between the armband and the body band, but not really the collar. I want to let you know here that the repeat for the collar is exactly the same. The only difference is the number of stitches you'll work. The collar stitch count is a little different, of course, based on the size, so again refer to the pattern for the stitch count when you come to that section of the pattern, but just keep in mind the technique here is exactly the same. So after you've worked that repeat a bunch more, it'll look something like this. Now I'm making an armband here, so it's much shorter than the body band, but you get the idea. When your work measures the length you need, don't fasten off, just rotate it so you can begin working along the edge. Once again, this step here is the same whether you're working on an arm piece or a body piece. The difference, of course, is the stitch count. So for this step, chain 1 and evenly space a certain number of half double crochets along the edge. Now the number of stitches you'll work, of course, depend on the size and the piece that you're making, the body or the arm. So go ahead and refer to the pattern to get that information based on the piece that you're working on. Now here's what it'll look like after you finish that step and the first row. From here, you'll chain 1 and turn. Again, this step is exactly the same whether you're working on the arm piece or the body piece. The chain 1, by the way, doesn't count as a stitch, so you'll half double crochet in the first stitch here. And then continue with 1 half double crochet in each remaining stitch. No increases or decreases here, so your stitch count will stay the same as the previous row. Until now, everything has been pretty much the same with the arm piece and the body piece, with the exception of the size and stitch count, but here's where we go our separate ways. If you're working on the body piece, repeat the last row until it reaches the measurement that's listed in the pattern. For the arm piece, we'll do something a little different, and that's what I want to demonstrate next. For the arm piece, continue by chaining 1 and turn your work. And this time we need to increase at the beginning and the end of this row. So to do that, we'll make 2 half double crochets in the first stitch. And then continue with 1 half double crochet in each stitch until you get to the last one. And in that last stitch, make 2 half double crochets again. That'll increase your stitch count by 2. So the majority of your arm piece will have the same repeat. 2 half double crochet rows followed by an increase row, the one where you do 2 half double crochets in the first and the last stitch. Now you'll work this 3-row repeat a number of times. Again, that number is determined by the size, so go ahead and refer to the pattern to get that information. And once you get to that point, you'll transition to 1 row of half double crochet followed by an increase row. So it'll go from a 3-row repeat to a 2-row repeat. And when you're done, you can fasten off and the arm piece will look like this. I left a nice long tail so I can seam the 2 ends together. We'll get to that in just a bit. So those are the basic crochet techniques that are needed to make this sweater. And here's what your pieces will look like when you're finished. Each of your body pieces will look like this, just a basic rectangle. And the collar. Let's talk about that for a minute. The collar is worked again in the same way as the bands for the arm and the body pieces, with the only difference being the number of stitches worked. So this is what your collar looks like when that's complete. And last but not least, you'll have your 2 arm pieces that have sort of a triangular shape to them. When you have all 5 pieces completed, the next step is the assembly, and this one takes probably more patience than anything. Find a flat surface and lay the 2 body pieces on top of one another with the band along the bottom edge. You can decide which you want to be the right side and the wrong side because they really look the same on both sides. And just make sure you have whatever your determined right side is facing inward for each of the front and back panels. Now for the seaming, I find it best to work a whip stitch. That works really well for me. If you know another technique, you can use whichever method you prefer. So you'll want to stitch along one of the sides until just beyond the halfway point. From there, we need to bring one of the arms into play. So go ahead and fold that in half lengthwise. So you have the angled side towards the band or facing the bottom of your sweater, and you have the fold aligned with your body piece. At the arm piece, you'll transition from seaming the 2 body pieces together to seaming 1 body piece to the arm piece. This will make sure you have an opening for your arm to fit through. You'll seam this along in the same way until you reach the top of the body piece. Then flip it so you can seam the arm and the body piece together on the opposite side. Now with the arm piece attached to the body piece, the next thing we need to seam is along the bottom edge of the arm, so it'll close that up, and we'll seam that using the same technique. When you finish with that, you'll repeat the previous steps on the opposite side. So you're seaming along the edge, adding the arm piece, and seaming the arm piece closed. Okay, at this point you have both arms attached and seamed. The last step is to make the shoulder seams and add the collar. Fold the collar in half and align it with the center of the body piece. Then just place a marker at each edge of the collar to let you know where to seam to. Now I did this off camera, but you can see my stitch marker here and I'm whip stitching to that point. And of course you'll do the same thing on the other side for the second shoulder seam. With the shoulder seams finished, align the edge of the collar with the neck opening and whip stitch the collar to the body piece until you reach the opposite shoulder seam. Then you'll just flip everything over and continue seaming the collar to the opposite body piece on the reverse side. When you have it completely sewn in place, the last step is to seam the two ends of the collar together. When you have that complete, turn it right side out and enjoy. Now, if you're struggling with any part of this project, be patient with yourself. Making garments is quite different than crocheting, say, a scarf, and it'll take a little practice, especially with those seaming steps. But I think you'll find it worth the extra effort. That's all for now, friend. Thank you so much for watching and especially sticking with me here until the end. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing that so I can continue to share crochet and knitting projects with you in the future. And also don't forget to check out B.Hooked Insider, where you can download the pattern and get pattern support. I'll have that linked in the description below. Thanks again for all the support, for watching, liking, subscribing, all of those things, becoming a B.Hooked Insider. Those actions, plain and simple, are how I'm able to continue sharing this craft we both love. Happy hooking, and I'll see you in the next one.